Going live. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're live. Hello and welcome to another day in the Milky Way, everybody. We got a great show for you. Another Native American Myths and Legends, number 60th episode with my co-host, David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for coming.
And greetings and blessings to all of you. And we hope and wish that you all are staying warm and that you've had a good holiday up to this point. And it'll soon be 2023. Ooh, ain't that going to be something? Here in just a couple of days.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah, Well, welcome everybody in the chat room. I hope you're all planning for a good New Year's and so forth, and had a great Christmas, regardless if you celebrate it or not. But the store's closed and you got to stay home and do something, right?
Yeah. And there are many folks that I know, and I've spent Sunday with them for it, whether you believed in Christmas or not. And we had fish dinner with hush puppies and fried fish. And I'm not much for grits, even though I've lived down here in the South most of my life. But this dear lady makes some cheese grits that just, I even like them, So, and we had homemade the cabbage and everything together,
Coleslaw.
Thank you, coleslaw. I was forgetting about that. And it was and hot banana nut bread for dessert.
Ooh,
and so
good.
And instead of having a Christmas and Santa Claus, which they try not to promote, instead relatives just brought in a sack and said, "Oh, look, I got a present for you here. This is for you, and this is for you." And so Santa Claus was everybody, and I brought a couple of things and for the kids to share, and everybody just brought it in, and we just said Merry Christmas, but there was nothing about Santa Claus or anything like that. But the watching the kids, their eyes light up for what the things that they got, it was great.
Nice.
Nothing was wrapped. It was just here's your present, Well, it was very interesting but cool at the same time.
That's pretty good. Like I said, Christmas is more for the kids and the gift giving part of it. As an adult, it is nice to get a gift of significance from somebody once in a while, but not necessary. I guess you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I think it's a friendship that we exchange and the get together and the like at our age, what more in life could you get? You know what I mean?
Yeah, seeing my friends the other day was just like, that was just a blessing in and of itself. Watching the kids, ooh, what is it? And here's they just omitted Santa Claus, which I thought was great. But to watch the children's faces, I can understand why my grandfather, who bought a train set back in the early 60s. I don't know if they still make train sets like that, but to see I can still remember his face and like, here, let's put this together. And these little pills make smoke come out of the smokestack. And I just remember he was happy because we were happy.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it. Yeah, it wasn't about the Christmas tree. It wasn't about what kind of package it was in. It was about that sharing,
Yeah. It's exactly.
So I hope you folks out there have had some type of sharing experience, that's whether you called it Christmas or not, or Hanukkah or whatever. Hopefully you've had a sharing experience.
Well, we did here on Christmas Eve, People came. I put everybody's name in a hat, and I'm getting everybody's packages packaged up, ready to send out. I got a bunch of them here. I got the Luckies. I got Andrew Phillips. I got Mary's. I got a whole bunch of them wrapped up already, and I got Soul Tribe cards for them, and Angel cards, and dream books, and all kinds of stuff I had to give away. And it was nice picking names. I feel bad for the ones I didn't have, but you can't give to everybody. I just had what I had,
Right.
and we just drew names, and it's one of those things that I can give back to everybody. So I'm pretty happy with that.
And you just do what you can do. I mean, hopefully everybody understands that, but you
Yes,
do what you can do under the circumstances, and blessings to all,
absolutely. We got a lot of people piling in. We got Susie Q, Witch Moon 73, Michelle Can-Am Free, Andrew Phillips, Nina the Mystic. She put on a great show. We're going to get together and do some shows ourselves here pretty soon. Let's see who else. Lucky Smith or Lucky Stone. I don't know. He changed his name. It's Lucky Stone. I like Lucky Stone better than Lucky Smith. But Susie Q, Elderberry. Yeah, everybody's piling in slowly but surely. But anyhow, don't forget, Nina's got hump day tomorrow. She'll be doing the readings or whatever she does for the hump day. I can't remember, but anyway, she does all of that. I love the way she picks the numbers, 1, 2, 3, or whatever, and you can kind of get in on that card read. Some days I get in on it, some days I don't. I don't know. It all depends if I'm busy or not. Some days I'm working too hard for it, But anyway, tonight we got a great show. We're going to do a little more out of this book. And then you got probably a story or two. We're going to continue on or find a different one or whichever book you picked out tonight.
It's the same book. We're just going to continue on. There's some very interesting stories. And so we're going to continue on in the same book that I've been reading from here the last couple of weeks. I have read through a bunch of these books that you sent me, and these are some of the oldest and just weirdly interesting. It's hard to explain.
Yes. Nina says we'll be starting our show on the 8th. Yes, we're going to be doing Agnos's spirit science, which I have right up here somewhere, and that I put away so that I didn't lose it. Go figure. When you put something down and then you put it so you can find it, and then you can't find it because I got too much junk. Nope, that ain't it too. I had it right here. I had it within arm's reach, but
the poltergeist moved it.
Yeah, no, I rearranged everything because I was looking for a book the other day. Don't you hate that when you pull out a book and you can't find the right one, and then you go and you put all the 1,000 books that I got back, and then you misplace it? Unless I didn't, and I put it down here somewhere. But life has been pretty cluttersome here in my house because of all the Christmas stuff going on. And then I moved everything so I could find it, and now I can't find it. Oh, shoot. What did I do with it? Oh well, I guess this isn't the time to look for it, but we'll get to it later. It's not a biggie, but if you don't have it, Agnos's book, I'm sure that I can send you the PDF if you email me, or Nina can do it. remember, I will be on Nina's channel, so go over there, check her out, get on that, and let's see, you can call me Lucky, Lucky Stone, Lucky Smith, or just Dude. I don't care if you call me as long as you don't call me late for dinner. Good one, Lucky. Good one.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. Just as long as you call me.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So anyway, you're gonna like this. We're gonna start out and talk some more about these lost civilizations this week. This will be the last time we probably talk about the lost civilizations. But I thought some of these were very interesting. Let's see. Okay. This one here, I didn't have any pictures for it because there wasn't no pictures. But he was talking about brass. They're talking about how these guys were Stone Age, and yet they find things like brass. And some of these chiefs things, they had brass, brass rings, etc. Let's see here. The six under a heap of dust and shreds of feathered cloth and hair, parcel of brass rings cut out of a solid piece of metal, and in such a manner that the rings were suspended from each other without the aid of solder or any other visible agency whatever. Each ring was 3 inches in diameter, and the bar of the rings and a ½ inch thick were square. A variety of characters were deeply engraved on the sides of the rings, resembling Chinese characters. You know, the Indians did not have something to cut brass with, like that.
They didn't know how to make brass.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly
back to they didn't know how to make brass.
Yeah, more or less make brass, cut it out of one piece of brass, and make rings that were interconnected, and then write on the rings in fine detail. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So where did they come from? And then it goes on about bells, offering of bells, lamps, jugs, holy water. They had all these different things they found. Pottery, the same kind found in those ancient works, have also quality and endure fire. The art of making vessels of clay is very ancient. We find it spoken by Jeremiah the prophet nearly 3,000 years ago. And they can make that stuff. Okay, but this is where it kind of gets interesting, and I got this underlined. The Indians of both China and America have, from time to time, immoral use of paints to adorn both themselves and their gods. But the brass rings, tessellated pavement are altogether the most to be wondered at. A knowledge of the method of manufacturing brass was known to the Andaluvians. We're going to be talking about Andaluvians a lot. This we learn from Genesis 2:2. Tubal Cain was an artificer in brass, artifier in brass, and iron about 1100 years before the flood. They're trying to incorporate all this stuff into the flood, I've noticed, out of this book. This is that book from the 1820s or 30s or whatever, 1833. And it says, but how this piece of brass chain of such curious construction came to the possession of a chief interred on the summit of the mountain is a question to be answered. It would seem in but two ways. They either had knowledge of the art of making brass, or the article was an item of the king's peculiar treasure, and he had been derived either from his ancestors from the earliest ages or from South America as an article of trade, a gift from some fellow king, or a trophy of some victorious battle over some southern nation. For according to Humboldt, brass was found among the native Mexicans in abundance. But how the Mexicans came by this art and mineralogy or equality a question. Gold, silver, copper, and are the natural products of their respective ores, and the accident may have made them acquainted with these, as iron was discovered among the Greeks by fire in the woods, having melted the ore, but brass is farther removed from knowledge of man in general, being a composition of copper and camel stone or chamomile stone or ore of zinc. However, it is said by more that in Chile and in the hills of Hiquiluma, I must pronounce that, are found mines of native brass of fine yellow color and equally maleficent and best artificial brass. Yes, this is no common product of mineralogy and would seem to be an exception, or rather a product of extraordinary. And it goes on and on about it.
But to the point, though, you had to have zinc.
Yes.
And you had to have copper.
Yes.
So you had to have two different elements and you had to mix them just right.
It says here, brass was a metal out of which the ancient nations made all their instruments of war and defensive armor. The reason of this preference above copper and iron, even by the Greeks and Romans, was probably on account of its extensive bright polish and it's capable of receiving. For the Greeks and the Romans used it long after their knowledge of iron. Iron was discovered by the Greeks in 1406, 1406 years before Christ. The ancient Americans must have derived a knowledge of brass from their early acquaintance with the nations immediately succeeding the flood, who had it from the Antediluvians by way of Noah. And it goes on from there. So we're going to move on to the next thing that I found. It just goes on about metal making and the Chinese and warfare and things like that. Okay, now we're going to go to Lexington, Kentucky. Lexington, Kentucky. This is a catacomb. You won't hear this on any report. Mummies found in a catacomb in Kentucky, Lexington, stands nearly on a site of an ancient town, which was of great extent and magnificence, as is amply evident by the wide range of cavalry works and the quality of the ground it once occupied. There is connected with the antiquities of this place a catacomb formed in the bowels of the limestone rock about 15 feet below the surface of the earth, adjacent to the town of Lexington. This grand object, so novel and extraordinary in the county, was discovered in 1775 by some of the first settlers, whose curiosity was excited by something remarkable in the character of the stones which covered the entrance to the cavern within. So it was a cavern that was covered with stones at the entrance. They removed the stones and came to the others of the singular appearance. For stones in a natural state, the removal of which laid open the mouth of the cave, deep, gloomy, and terrific as they supposed. With augmented numbers and provided with light, they descended and entered without obstruction a spacious apartment. The sides and extreme ends were formed into niches and compartments and occupied by figures representing men. When alarm subsided and the sentiment of dismay, the surprise permitted further research and inquiry. The figures were found to be mummies, preserved by the art of embalming to a state of perfection, as known among the ancient Egyptians, 1800 years before the Christian era, which was about the time of the Israelites were in bondage in Egypt, when this art was in its highest state of perfection. Unfortunately, for antiquity, science, and everything else held sacred by the illuminated and learned, this insensible discovery was made at a period when a bloody and intricate war was carried on between the Indians and the whites, and the power of the natives was displayed in so savage a manner that the whites were filled with the spirit of revenge. Animated by a vindictive spirit, the discoveries of the catacomb delighted to wreak their vengeance even on the mummies, supposing them to be of the same Indian race with whom they were at war. They dragged them out into the open air, tore off the bandages, kicked the bodies into dust, and made a general bonfire of the most ancient remnants antiquity could boast. The descent into the cavern is gradual, that within 4 feet, the height 7 only, and the whole length of the catacomb was found to be 18 rods and a half by 6.5. And calculating from the niches and shelving on the sides, it was significantly spacious to have contained at least 2,000 subjects. I can never say, said Mr. Ash, from whose travels were taken this account, learn the exact quantity it contained. The answers in the inquiries which he made respecting it, oh, they burnt up and destroyed hundreds, nor could he arrive at any knowledge of the fashion, manner, and apparel of the mummies, or the receiving any other information that then they had, were well lapped up, appeared sound, and consumed in the fire with a rapid flame, but not being contented with this uncertain information of persons who, it seems, had no adequate knowledge of the value of the discovery. He caused the caverns to be gleaned for such fragments of yet remain in the niches on the shelves and sides and from the floor. The quantity of the remains thus gathered up amounted to 40 or 50 baskets, the dust of which was so light and pungent as to affect the eyes even to tears, and the nose to sneezing to troublesome degree. He then proceeded on a minute investigation and separated from the general mass several pieces of human limbs, fragments of bone or bodies, solid, sound, and apparently capable of external duration. In a cold state, they had no smell whatsoever, but submitted to the action of fire, gave out an agreeable effluvia, but was like nothing in its fragrance to which he could compare it. On this subject, Mr. Ash has the following reflections: how these bodies were embalmed, how long preserved, by what nations, and from what people descended. No opinion can be formed, nor any calculation made, but what must result from speculative fancy, the wild conjures. For my part, I am almost lost with deepest ignorance. My reading affords me no knowledge, my travels no light. I have neither read nor known any of the North American Indians who formed catacombs for their dead, or who were acquainted with the art of preservation by embalming. So he's basically saying, we never embalmed anything.
Nope.
The Indians never embalmed. They never had catacombs. They didn't preserve their dead like that at all. So who were these people? Who embalms mummies, puts them in a cave and seals them up, especially 1,800 to 2,000 of them. I mean, yes, mummies in Lexington, Kentucky in 1775. But see, then this is where the white man gets all screwed up. They're at war with the Indians, and right away they just say, those must be the Indian mummies, right? We need to destroy them, enact our revenge. And then lost to history they will be.
Just like the white man,
Yeah, exactly. Destroy, destroy, destroy. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to go to Cincinnati. Let's see. Oh, okay, this is the one I want. Cincinnati is situated on one of those examples of antiquity, a great extent. They are found in the upper levels of the town, but none on the lower one. They're so conspicuous as to catch the first range of the eye. There's every reason to suppose that the remote period of the building of these antiquities, the lowest level formed part of a bed of the Ohio. A gentleman who was living near the town of Cincinnati in 1826 on the upper level had occasion to sink a well for his accommodation, who preserved in digging to a depth of 80 feet without finding water, but still persisting in the attempt, his workmen found themselves obstructed by a substance which resisted their labor. Though evidently not stone, they cleared the surface and sides from the earth bed around it, when there appeared the stump of a tree, 3 feet in diameter and 2 feet high, which had been cut down with an axe. The blows of the axe were yet visible. It was nearly of the color and apparent character of coal, but had not the fragmentable and fusibility quality of that mineral. 10 feet below, the water sprang up, and the well is now in constant supply and high repute. Reflections on this discovery are these: first, that the tree was undoubtedly antediluvian. Second, that the river now called the Ohio did not exist ulterior to the deluge, in as much as the remains of the tree were found firmly rooted in its original position, several feet below the bed of the river, or that of the river. Third, that America was peopled before the flood, as it appears from the action of the axe let me turn the page, in cutting down the tree. Fourth, the antediluvian Americans were acquainted with the use and properties of iron, as the rust of the axe was on top of the stump when discovered. And why should they not be acquainted with both these properties and utility, seeing it was antediluvian discovery? Tubal Cain, one of the sons of Cain, the sons of Adam, we find, according to the Genesis verse, was a blacksmith, worked in iron and brass more than 1,000 years before the flood. It was about 500 years from the creation when Tubal Cain is noticed in the sacred history to have been a worker in brass and iron. And then it goes on and on about that. And then it talks about Roman plows. It says, according to this opinion, it would appear that in the very first period of time, men were acquainted with these metals as they diverged from the common center and was near the Garden of Eden, and they carried them a knowledge of all that was important for this discovery. If the stump is indeed antediluvian, we learn one more important fact, and that is America, by whatever name it was called before the deluge, was then a body of earth above the waters, and also was connected probably with Asia, where it allowed on all hands man was originated. So there you go. And then it goes on about the flood some more. But I thought that was kind of cool because, you know, as much as we've talked about the Indians and stuff like that, it always goes back to, well, they didn't have iron. They didn't have metal axes. They didn't have that stuff. That's why they had to trade with the white man. And here they find a tree stump, and that was 80 feet down below the ground. And then they had proof that it was cut by an axe with the axe markings still on it. You know, kind of odd, don't you think?
Yeah. But what I find interesting is that everything is related to the deluge.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what this book is.
You
The
know,
whole
but
book
I
is.
mean, but see, that's that Christian
Yeah,
kind of thought. Even though there are we discussed that there were native stories of a great flood as well.
yes.
That
Yeah.
just because there was a flood doesn't mean that that's what put that tree stump 80 feet below the ground. I just want to point that out. A just because there was a big flood don't mean that that's, because it takes a long time. I live on a river, right? So I've been
Yeah.
able to see when floods come, how it moves the sand and the dirt, and after a big flood, the shoreline is never the same. Something has been changed, but to deposit that much dirt, 80 feet of dirt on top of a tree stump, that's going to take a while. That's going to take a long while.
Or it
And it's
was,
probably because of the river flooding and changing and stuff, that could have been somehow prompted by the Great Flood. But the fact that the author assumes that the flood is what did it, I just want to tell folks, I don't think so.
well, nobody
Takes
said that.
years of sediment. It would be more likely that because they have discussed that there were great glaciers on the, and so I would be more apt to say that, a glacier came at some point and deposited a crap load of dirt on top of it. But
Oh, and
that's my humble opinion.
well, I remember in the beginning here, we had read once about the China. It says history of the China before the flood. And they were talking about how big some of the floods were. And if I can find it here, and how many, thousands of years they were actually before, Christ. And that there was, how many floods. There was multiple floods. And they talk about flood after flood. And then they said that which speaks of two great floods, which desolated but did not overflow the land. So they talk about two great floods here, but who's to say, like you said, could there be the two great floods plus maybe, 10 other little floods?
Oh, I'm
And,
sure. I would,
you know,
yeah. Because here's the thing. If you believe in the Pangea thing of, internal island, that the planet was much smaller. So the expansion of the planet would absolutely cause floods and things.
yes.
I mean, oh yeah, I can see it.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. So just assuming that this guy was cutting this tree that was what, 3 foot by 3 foot or something like that. That's a pretty big tree. with an
Yeah.
axe. And not long after he cut that tree, that stump was covered up by the flood, or a flood of some sort, to preserve, all those fresh tree wax. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
And how the author, though, kind of assumes that somehow it's connected to Asia and also somehow to Noah.
yeah, well, I mean, back in the day, what other reference do they really have? I mean, we do have a little bit more science now, though, than in 1833. And
Right, but I'm saying that in 1833 they were still crossing, with sails. They didn't have steam, I don't think, at the time. So I mean,
yeah,
but so it was an old world kind of point of view. So how did
yes.
they get this idea, though, that somehow in America the same things were going on that were going on in Europe?
Well, and he also refers it to Cain. He's always bringing Cain up. Cain was the forger. He was the blacksmith. So they must have been descendants of him, and yet I'm thinking, well, why do they have to be descendants of Cain?
Right, exactly. That's my point. That
Yeah,
they have to use the Bible as their reference, because
that's it.
Christianity and the Bible is like, that's their point of view. That's their point of reference. So yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah, and
wanted to point that out.
that's really the only point. I mean, that's the oldest book they got to probably go on. So yeah, I get it.
And they
Not
can't believe anything else.
yes,
They've got, I mean, even folks today is like, no, the earth is only 6,500 years old.
yeah,
Nope, mankind is only 6,500 years old,
yeah,
because the Bible says.
yes, exactly. Which is a little outdated. I mean, we have lots of proof that there's been people around for hundreds of years. Well, it's like, okay, last week I think I read something about how and I thought a lot about this, where they seen these people walking. There's prints of the people walking that had, big large feet, and then all of a sudden there's a horse with this giant hoof print, and in America, and then they could see where it had slipped on the mud, and then it got me thinking about that. And then now it's stone, right? And I'm thinking, well, when something is mud and it has to turn to stone, as well as I do, that has to happen once that horse was in the mud, for instance. We're just saying. And I live in an area where there's lots of muddish clay. And if I make a track like now, and it freezes, it'll stay there for a long time. But then summer comes, it rains more, and eventually in 6 months, that track is gone. No
Right.
matter how deep I made that track, whatever. So here's the thing. So they made that track, it slipped in the mud, and then soon after that, there was no more rain. It got really hard, and then something either covered it up and froze it into place.
Or it heated it up really quick.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like in the summer, you can make a
Well,
track.
or like some, like an asteroid or something. I mean, something heated that rock up
Yes, because
in order to, because discussing pottery and things, you got to heat it up pretty quick, for it to keep its form. And
yes,
so it could have frozen or whatever, but then after that, the next thing in order to cure it would have been heat.
well, yeah, heat or
A tremendous heat.
tremendous heat. Exactly. So, in that logic, we know there was man here. Then we know there was horses here. And all of a sudden they made tracks in mud, and then now there's no horse, nor there was man that size, and the tracks are frozen. So whatever happened, like you said, something, and then that's what I thought about all week. I thought the same thing. You either heat it up so it's preserved, or it gets covered up and or frozen some way and in time. But whatever happened, it never rained after that. And
Well,
or
it probably did, but to the point though, between the time it had to cure,
yes,
it probably rained afterwards, but whatever happened to cure it,
yeah,
so that the rain didn't affect it.
yes, but that's what I'm saying. Whatever happened there got rid of the horse and the man, and it froze the tracks, and then they're preserved for all times. But the question is what the hell was going on? Why was this guy in a hurry, and why was he going through this mud? And then all of a sudden the rain stopped and it dried up.
It was a phaser blast.
Yeah, there you go.
But I mean, seriously, there are some things that are like, out in the Sahara Desert, where there are things that have been exposed to extreme heats.
Yeah.
That, you just got to go, wait a minute now. So I know this is, way out there, but what if he was some kind of somebody that was being tracked by aliens a long time ago, and they fragged him with a phaser blast that would take care of the horse and the man, and would explain why their tracks are frozen and turned to stone. What else could turn just mud into stone that quickly to preserve it in the way that it is?
The heat of a
I'm just
comet.
saying, I know that's whacked out and everything, but what
well,
if?
well, but that's the thing. Here's my thought though. If there's one horse, there's usually a bunch of horses. If there's one man, there's usually a bunch of men. It's just like mice. If you got one mouse in your house, you probably got two or three more, somewhere
Yeah,
there.
there's more than one. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So the thing is, but we know when the first white man came, there was no horses in America. And so that's my thoughts, is there was horses here, and something happened and destroyed them all, every single one of them.
Well, a long time ago, there was sort of like a prehistoric horse that was here in America.
Well,
But,
yeah.
But what's to say, though, that because we don't have any real record, that between prehistoric time and let's say 6,000 years ago, or even maybe 10, some of those things, left over from the dinosaurs were still around. And whoever was living at the time, somehow they utilized them, like, alpacas or donkeys or something, but that after that, there's that span of time that, stuff happened. They lost the technology. Atlantis,
Yeah.
Lemuria
I
is
do.
gone. I mean, a lot of stuff from the old writings, things went below the ocean, and Lemuria, they all moved to the Americas. So,
Well, and I think you're right. I mean, there's something. All I can say is I think something big happened.
Oh yeah.
Because like I said, here's this guy discovered the stump. You can see the fresh axe cuts when they dug it up. They could see the rust from the axe still on the stump. And so it'd been cut by an iron axe. And then, like I said, the other one was the horse. So now we don't have metal usage, iron, nor do we have brass usage in Americas, nor do we have horses. Something happened and wiped all that technology and all those animals right off the face of the earth.
And the knowledge.
And the knowledge.
Yep.
And there's only a couple things that could do that.
Oh, and let me tell you, I've worked with brass a lot over the years and in industry. You are not going to cut a tree down with brass.
Yeah.
Not easily. It's going to
No.
dull. It's going to, now you can, use it for a shield or something like that, or arrows, but you're not going to cut a tree down with brass. All right. It just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
The properties are too soft.
Too soft. Yeah. Just like you ain't going to cut it down with a copper either.
Nope.
And or gold or silver or any of that kind of stuff. But they found stuff, before. So anyway, we're going to get on with this. So I jumped to the back of the book, and it says causes of the disappearance of the ancient nations. And I thought this was good to finish this up with. But what finally became of the ancient nations? Where are their descendants? Are questions which could they be answered would be highly gratifying. On opening a mound below Wheeling on the Ohio, must be West Virginia, a few years since, a stone was found having on it a brand exactly similar to that one commonly used by the Mexican nations in marking their cattle and horses. From this, it is evident that the ancient nations were not savages, or a trait of domestication of animals would not be found in the country they once inhabited. The head of a Mexican hog, cut off square, was found in the Saltpeter Cave in Kentucky, not long since by Dr. Brown. This circumstance is mentioned by Dr. Drake in his Pictures of Cincinnati. The nitrate had preserved it. It had been deposited there by an ancient inhabitants, where it must have laid for ages. The animal is not found, it is said, in north of the Mexican country, the north line of which is about of the 40th degree of north latitude. And the presumption is that the inhabitants took these animals along with them in their migrations until they finally settled in Mexico. Other animals, as elk, the moose, and the buffalo, were doubtless domesticated by them and used for agriculture purposes, as the ox, the horse, and various other animals are now a use among us. The wild sheep of Oregon, Louisiana, California, and the Rocky Mountains, the same found in north of Asia, may be the remnants of flocks of the animal once domesticated all over these regions by those people and used for food. One means of their disappearance may have been the noxious alluvia, or smell, which would inevitably arise from the bottoms of those vast bodies of water, which must have had a pestilence effect on. They're trying to on the people settled around them. They're trying to say what they're trying to say is the lakes themselves, all these lakes and rivers, or the lakes and ponds and stuff that covered up all the stuff below them during one of these floods, rotted. And as these people came back, that would have gave off a methane or H2S gas at times, which would have killed everybody off. The position needs no explanation. It's known that the heat of the sun and its action on swamps and marshy ground fills the region around them with a deadly scent, acting directly on the economy and construction of the human subject, while animals of coarser habits escape. Who has not experienced this on a sudden draining of a stagnant waters, or even those of a mill pond? The reason is the filth settlement at the bottom of such places becomes exposed by having the cover taken away, which was the waters, and the winds immediately, wafting the deleterious vapors surrounding the atmosphere becomes corrupted. Disease follows with death in its train. But on the sudden draining of such great body of water from such immense tracts of land, which had been accumulated filth formed of decay, vegetation, and animals from the time of the deluge till their passage off at that time, the stench must have been beyond all conception dreadful. Such is the fact on the subsiding of the waters of the Nile in Egypt, which, after having overflown the whole valley of the river, about 500 miles in length, 15 to 25 in width, leaves an insufferable stench, and is true origin of the plague which sweeps to eternity annually. It's thousands in that country. It is not therefore impossible nor improbable, but by this very means the ancient nations settled around these waters may have indeed been exterminated, or if they were not exterminated, must have been exceedingly reduced in numbers, so as to induce the residue or to flee so dangerous a country far to the south, or any side to flee dangerous anywhere from the effects of the dreadful smell arising from the newly exposed chasms and gulfs. Well, there you go. So that's their thoughts on what might have gotten rid of the people.
Well, living in a swamp that sometimes is covered for weeks or months with flood water, and then it suddenly, recedes.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a smell, but a couple of days later, after the sun comes out, and if it dries, so this idea that somehow the stench was so overwhelming. Well, if you've ever been anywhere along a marsh, along the Gulf or the Atlantic or something, when the tide goes out, low tide stinks. But it don't mean it's going to kill you, because there's a lot of people that live around marshes and have lived there all their lives. And you'd think that if that were the case, there wouldn't be anybody alive around a marsh. They would ban it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like down in the Everglades and stuff. So I don't prescribe to that. That could some of them have got something? Yeah. But just because there are leaves and stuff that come out of trees and end up in the rivers and the lakes and ponds, and when they go down around here, there are not livestock and people dying. I mean,
yeah.
Just I don't ascribe to that. I'm sorry, but that's one that is just like, okay.
Well, I think they were trying to figure out where did all these, just like we were just talking about, where did all these people and animals and things go, and where did that technology disappear to? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I think they were they're trying to justify, where did these people go?
They got in their spaceship and went someplace else. But honestly, that could have happened too. But to the point that they all disappeared because of lakes drying up, and that's like, there are still people who think that dinosaurs made the oil.
Yes. Yeah.
When oil, I mean, the La Brea tar pit is where they found ancient dinosaurs. So wait a minute. So there was oil and tar when there was dinosaurs. So but the dinosaurs never mind. But they try to convince us of some of this stuff, and it's just like, wait a minute. I'm sorry, but in my 70 years of being around and seeing dried lake bottoms and swamps and stuff myself, it stinks. But I ain't dead yet, and folks are living around swamps and down in Louisiana and places like that, and I mean all down in the Everglades, and all them folks that lived in, they didn't die of those kind. They died of other things, but I don't think it was because of low tide. I mean, you're basically saying it's low tide. You know, they died a
Yeah.
low tide. You know, the
Well,
water
no,
went down and things were exposed. And if that were true, you know, anybody that lived along the coast would be dead. But anyway,
no, I agree. I mean, it's kind of hard to fathom. I think they're stretching it a little bit there.
well,
You
but
know,
it
but
was 1833 that book was written.
yes,
So
yes.
they didn't have a, you know, they're still trying to use the Bible as some kind of way, and that it must have been a plague from God. You know what I mean? The
Oh
lakes
yeah, yeah.
went down, and therefore all the dead things, you know, must have killed everybody. You know?
Well, they were trying, I mean, like you said, they're finding these artifacts. They're finding uh things like that, and they're trying to justify how could these people all of a sudden, just disappear? Where did these people go? You know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
I kind of agree, because I'm thinking, yeah, you got some guy cutting a tree down with an axe, you got, mounds, you got brass, you got, things like this, that catacombs, that are sealed up. So here's the thing, somebody was alive to seal these catacombs up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now I've
And
told this story on my channel before, but this might be a good place to add to it. There are caves very near where I live, and I've been down in Climax Cave about 11 times over my career. And there are different places called Blowing Hole and other places that are near here that the old timers knew and some of the Native Americans knew, but nowadays they're just, the caves are still there, the entrances are still there.
yeah,
But anyway, some friends of mine many years ago, I hadn't been here in, I hadn't bought this place yet. So 45 years ago, I'm talking with a friend of mine that I worked with, and I said, you know, I was in Climax Cave, and he goes, well, I've been in this place down near Pelham, and we knew the farmer, and two of my buddies from college, we went down in the hole. And so he's describing it to me and everything, and he goes, we went down there, and there's an underground river that was just really a lot wider than we would have expected underground. And he
mhm,
said, and over in the corner, while we're walking around in the caves and climbing, we find this archway that had been carved in the rock. And he said, we went nuts. And he goes, in front of it, you know, where it was covered with rocks and all sealed up. And he goes, you know, we're just we're pulling them out and everything and make a hole, and we crawl inside. And he said, about 8 to 10 feet in, he said, we just all could fit in there, was another wall that was all sealed up. And he said, the hair on the backs of our necks stood up, the hair on our arms stood up. We looked at each other, and without a word, we hauled ass out of that little area. And we, whatever was be on the other side of that next wall, they did not want to find out. They backed out of it. And he said, we argued for an hour which rocks went where, because they wanted to put them back exactly where they were. But to the point though, now that's been 45 years ago. I seriously doubt anybody's been back down in that hole. But who did it?
yeah.
Number one, but why did they do it? And what the hell is on the other side of that second wall that they had to do two walls to lock it up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but that's ancient tech. That's ancient stuff that's here. You know, I mean, anyway.
Well, no, I totally agree. That's what the guy was saying in the book in 1775 there, that, they found one of those, uh, you know, walls in the entrance to this cave. And when they went in, holy cow, there's a catacombs, 2,000 mummified bodies in here. So first off, that tells me that they had knowledge of mummification. That tells me that they were intelligent people. It tells me that, they had some kind of system to preserve their dead, and acknowledge that. they'd been there long enough that 1,800 people or about more had died. So they had a big population. And last but not least, there was still some people alive to seal up the entrance of that cave.
Yeah, and to do the last embalming.
Yes, exactly. To finish it up, seal the cave, and say, adios, we got to go. So,
which
that makes,
also kind of suggests a religion.
yes, it does. It suggests some sort of religion or
spiritual something. I mean, that they would preserve the bodies in
yes.
such a manner versus just burying them or eating them or, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So it tells you a lot about the, what's going on just by the story. But and who knows if there's others out there that haven't been discovered yet. Like you said, a wall behind a wall, down in a cave by a river. I mean,
the river was underground.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
An underground river, and here's this archway that's all, so there's more to it than just that. And so somebody had went down there, somebody with technology to make the archway, then to wall it up, then they have another wall behind that. And what was behind that, we just don't know. Spooky.
Yeah, that's what he said. And he was he had a master's degree, and his buddies were, college grads. So it wasn't like these guys were, just a couple of hillbillies that went down there and, no,
Yeah.
I mean, but he said, and when he looked at me in a way that suggested that he was scared out of his pants.
Yeah. And then that's exactly it.
We wouldn't even touch that other wall. We just crawled in there, and the first guy through just kind of went, and the second guy was like, and the third guy in was like, uh-oh, and they just turned around and left. I mean, now that's pretty. He was a very serious person. He did not joke in those kinds of ways. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
he was a spelunker. He liked going in caves and crawling around and stuff, and and there are quite a few holes in the ground around here. I found out. But to the point though, it was not easy to get to that location. Number one, you had to go down a hole and then crawl over a bunch of stuff to get to where that spot was. So it wasn't like you could just walk in this spot. Now that's one thing, but how ancient, who knows about that? I mean, seriously, how ancient it is. And, was it just local Native Americans who found the hole and went to all that trouble to crawl all the way down in that hole to carve out that rock? And I've been in the bottom of, in Climax Cave, and it's not like there are just rocks strewn about. You'd have to make the rock small enough to build, to put it up in the archway. So there are a lot of other things, and it's like, And then of course, in this particular situation, why the double walls and why all the way back in the, I mean, but that's one we'll never know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But that's what I'm saying is this early book here, there's more of that stuff to be found.
Yep.
That leads to more questions that, we just it got covered up and destroyed when the white man came through saying, I'm going to build a house here and I'm digging a well. And he didn't care if there's a stump down there or not. The question is how many, 80 feet down, there's things 80 feet down and they're probably still there. And how many times, what was it, a few years back, the one guy was plowing his field in Michigan and plowed up a giant tusk from a mammoth or something. Remember that?
Yeah.
It's like, What?
Here on my own place, I mean, the corner of my house over there. When I was digging the foundation, I was, you know, I believe in putting concrete down to hold things still, right?
Yeah.
And so I dug down and I ran into a tree stump that was at least 2.5 feet below the ground. That's at the corner of my house over there. And I'm digging with post hole diggers and a shovel and digging the foundation years ago. And boom, 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 boom. What the hell is this? And it was a tree stump.
Yeah.
So I have personal experience, and I found it interesting that the corner of the house, there was a tree stump under where I put the corner of the house. And it was so deep, I discovered it's still there.
Yeah.
So, but the field, I mean, when I bought this place, it was planted in wheat.
Yeah.
And so obviously a tree stump, they'd cleared it many years ago. And over the many years, you know, it would be easy and obvious that there was a lot of erosion that would have covered the tree stump. So when I hear the story about the one in Cincinnati, which is where I was born, by the way, but the idea though that, you know, I've thought about that stump under the corner of the house and wondered how long did it take for the field to wash down to cover that stump up, you know, for it to be, you know, it was a good close to 3 foot down because I had to dig the foundation that deep. So, but anyway, so there's a little personal, you know, about that.
Well, yeah, you know, so I totally agree with you. You know, I mean, but it's stuff like that. You just sit there and you or I would just say, well, there's a tree stump there and I ain't gonna dig it out. It's 3 foot down. I don't care. But that it just tells you that what's under the ground we're walking on, you know.
Exactly. That was the point I was trying to make earlier about, you know, the caverns that are underneath this area around here. And we really don't know what's under us.
Yes.
We really don't. What's been covered up, whether by flood or sediment or I was going to say avalanche, but I was thinking what I called it earlier.
Yeah.
The big ice sheets things.
Yeah, glaciers.
Glaciers, thank you.
You know, but what we're I guess this whole story thing is about is, you know, we see the Native Americans and they were very primitive in a lot of ways, you know, stone tools, feathers, wood, everything, you know. They didn't have these tools. And remember we were talking last week about if your population was reduced to the bare minimum, you know, how many traditions would you keep up with? And then what traditions, if you had technology, would get lost going, and or would you reject a lot of those things thinking I have to go a different way because whatever was happened may have happened because I was using this technology.
Right.
You know, or
go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, well, like I said, or the use of the blacksmith guy that used to know what ores make iron and how to get it, or the iron pit that we had over here was covered up in this mud flood, and now we can't get to it. And the 3 guys that used to know how to make iron, they died in the flood,
right,
or whatever, and now nobody knows how to do it.
Right.
And so, well, you know, we could just get stone and make some stone spears and it'll work just good, you know.
Yeah, which is interesting because, you know, there's the Clovis point and there's this kind of point, and there were different types of arrowheads. And I did years ago, I did a thing just because my daughter and her partner at the time made arrow points and spear points and stuff. And I met a lot of other folks who did flint knapping.
Yeah.
And the different types of flint and where it comes from. And so, you know, you find an arrowhead, let's just say up in the Northwest, that actually the flint came from down here in the Flint River, you know, and they find out that they've traded flint so that they could make, but to the other side of this is, so there's a, you know, the main guy who makes all the good blades and who's really adept at it, you know, they go out on a hunt and he gets trampled by a buffalo. So now who takes over?
Yeah.
Well, there's an apprentice, but he's the apprentice. He ain't the master. So he's got to learn. Well, what happens if, you know, he just gets sick and or something and he can't do it? So who's next in line? Does everybody know how to nap? Does everybody, I mean, you know, but to the point, so these traditions, you know, they tried to teach as many people so the tradition would last. So like the dances, so, you know, they were like, you know, when what Buffalo Calf Woman brought the pipe and taught them how to use the pipe and how to do ceremonies. So the ceremony just wasn't for the shaman or the medicine man.
Yeah.
It was for everybody to learn.
Yep.
So that the tradition could be passed along. So to the point of losing whatever metalworking or whatever, it may have been that it was a specialized thing. And when those folks were gone, that's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it would be so quick. I mean, you know, who today would, I mean, as much as I've worked with metals and stuff, I wouldn't know how to make brass.
Yeah, neither.
You know?
Or well, like knapping flint or, you know, making a stone spearhead. I wouldn't know how to do that.
I could get by, and with practice, I could do it. But even though I've been around flint knappers and stuff, I'm not even a novice. I'm not even an apprentice, you know.
Yeah,
I'm a bystander, but I've seen enough to where if I've got some flint around here, so I could practice, I could try it, but you know, other people that have never seen it or worked it or seen somebody do it, I mean, whoa, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole thing. And then you know, like we already know that when the plague thing went through with the smallpox and stuff like that, when the first white man came, it wiped out 95% of the Indians.
Yeah.
You know,
and the knowledge.
And the knowledge, yeah, all across the nation as fast as, you know, wildfire. So you got, you know, 5% that was left to repopulate. I mean, how much knowledge was lost there? You know, I mean, yeah, you know, I mean, tribes bonded together and, you know, they had their traditions and repopulated and stuff. But for the most part, I wonder how much knowledge was actually lost, you know, and I think there was a lot lost. I really do.
Yeah, because if one has survived is a lot.
Yeah, we
when
think
you get right down to it, but when you think about back in the day, all of the accumulated knowledge of people who'd lived on this planet, you know, I mean, I've been here 70 years and there's just knowledge that I have accumulated that a lot of other folks just won't get. And if not, I'm not trying to brag. It's just that, you know, I worked on a carnival. I helped a friend of mine yesterday move 2 motors connected in the back to a transfer case. This thing was like 1,500 pounds. And the 2 of us manhandled this thing in the back of my trailer. It's sitting out in the yard. But to the point though, I've had a lot of experience in carny business in moving large pieces. You know, when you take the center out of on the back of a truck to set up like for the scrambler, which I ran for years, you know, you got to know how to get it out of the truck. You got to know how to set it up and level it so your ride runs right. But if nobody's ever done something like that, they ain't got a clue about leveling something and why you would level it. I mean, just how did you move this great big heavy piece of machinery with a couple of pry bars and some logs? You
This
know,
is true. Yeah.
but
Yep.
how many people? You know, the small carnies are about dead now, but to the point, you know, what we used was actually caveman kind of stuff with leverage.
Yeah.
You know, and blocks and simple things. And folks today would go, I don't know how to do that. Well, you know, let's go find something to pry it with. You know, what do you mean pry it? You know, I mean, they don't. So there is stuff that just folks just, you know, that I understand and know. And some folks my age, they kind of get along with it, but young folks today, they ain't got a clue what I'm talking about. Not a clue. Not a clue.
Not a clue. I totally agree. I
So
totally agree.
there's like basic information that's not known anymore because at the moment it's not necessary.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and that's what I'm saying is we've studied these cultures and we knew they had great cities of, you know, thousands and thousands of people. And just like our great cities that we have now of millions of people, those people that are in those cities don't do all those things that you and I do in the countryside. They
nope.
don't know how to hunt. They don't know how to fish. They don't know how to, you know, make a knife out of a piece of flint. They don't know how to do a lot of these things. They don't know how to grow anything or have a garden because they live in a city, so they just go shopping every day. You know, they have other professions that they have when they live in a city, which is fine because that's city life. But they get all their stuff from the country people, bringing it into the city so that they can survive,
Yep.
right? And if something would ever happen and the products quit coming into the city, those people are going to be really hard pressed, even if they have to go out into the country, because they're going to have no clue on what to do or how things work. You know, what
That's
do
right.
you,
And remember, you know, not long ago we had the toilet paper shortage
yes,
that none of us expected. But for us country folk, we remember going out to the outhouse and using, guess what? The Sears Roebuck catalog. And folks don't remember that. And how did you make that catalog? While you sat there doing your business, you tore a couple of pages out of the catalog and you rolled them up in your hands to soften the paper. You know, oh my God, we ran out of toilet paper. Yeah, but you got magazines and you got newspapers and you got other, but we don't have any toilet paper. Oh my God, we don't have any Charmin. What is my butt gonna do? Well, what did folks' butts do even back when I was a kid? They used the Sears Roebuck catalog, you know, when they went out to the outhouse.
oh
I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
doing it as a child, and I talked to my aunt about it. And her grandwomen, yeah, her grandmother, my gross mother would have been my great grandmother. Out in the barn was a 2-seater.
yeah.
You know, what's a 2-seater? Well, you sat side by side. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, here's the catalog. You know, and you know that was
Yeah,
common back in those days.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, let's get on, and we're at the end of the shitter here.
Yeah, we have a
Okay.
tendency to wander.
I got the book pulled up. I gotta remember which book it is called. American Fairy Tales, Snowbird and the Water Tiger.
Yep, that's the one.
All right.
And we're going to page 103.
103.
Wait, yeah, I think so. Yep.
The fighting hare?
The fighting hare. Yep.
All right. Woo,
and on a windy day, you know, ladies, you can fight with your hair as well, but I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right.
Bad joke.
And there we go. There we go. Let's see if I can enlarge it.
I've read a lot of stories about rabbit, and you know, some stories call him Glooskap.
Yeah.
But this is one that I was like, So let me cough up some phlegm and wet my whistle. And we shall begin. Are you ready there on your side? I got mine pulled up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, mine's pulled up and hopefully it's sharing with everybody.
Okay, hang on. Let me get mine adjusted. When I change pages on mine, it's slow to catch up. So, but anyway. All right, here we go. The fighting hare. The prince of the hares was playing with his children in front of his burrow one day, when growing tired, he threw back his ears, drew in his feet, and lay down to sleep. Meanwhile, the sun came up and passed so close to the earth that it burnt his back, full of holes. The hare felt very sore, and as he rubbed himself, his fur came off in great patches, so that his beauty was spoiled. He was furiously angry and started up, cried out that he would fight the sun, and in spite of all that his friends could say, went at once in pursuit of him. The land where the hare lived was a vast plain. When he had come to the end of it, he climbed a high hill in order to look over the country. He saw below him on the other side a field of green plumes nodding to the west wind. He had never seen corn growing before, and he did not know what these plumes were. He ran eagerly to the place, broke off as many as he could carry, and hid them behind the rocks. Then he rubbed 2 dead branches together and made a fire in which he roasted the corn. Presently, the owner came along and, seeing the damage done, called his warriors to fight the thief. The hare had burrowed a hole at the side of the rock, and when the arrows were hurled at him, he blew them back with his magic breath. The warriors ran to catch him, but so great was their haste that one rushed upon another, and each caught only the other's fist. Then they thought of digging him out. They worked until the Sun Prince was halfway home, but before they had caught sight of the hare, he had escaped through a secret passage. He ran to a rock a little way off and higher than the one beneath which they were digging, and hurled his magic ball at the burrow, breaking away the floor and the sides so that it fell in, burying the chief and all of his followers. The next morning, the hare saw 2 men making arrowheads out of hot rocks. He watched them heating the rocks, and when they were hot, red hot, he cried out, "Oh, hot rocks will not burn me." The men looked up, and one of them said, "Are you a wizard?" "No," said the hare, "but I am a better man than you are, or the man who is working with you. I will lie on the hot rocks if you will let me hold you on them in the same manner." They agreed. So when the rocks were glowing, The men pressed him down against them with their hands, but he breathed heavily, and his magic breath so cooled the part on which he was lying that not a particle of his fur was singed. The men, having no protection, soon begged for mercy, but the hare held them to their promise, and they both perished. So much for making oneself equal to a wizard, said the hare to himself as he continued his journey. The following day he passed by a high cliff round which the winds blew so hard that it was known by the men of that country as Hurricane Cliff. It overhung a deep ravine in which were sunflowers as tall as trees, and the heads were heavy with seeds. The hare took a handful of seeds and amused himself by throwing them into the air and catching them in his mouth. While doing this, he heard voices, and looking up, he saw a group of women who were plotting to kill him. "Aho," they said, "let us call the hurricane to hurl a rock down on him." The hare said nothing, but went in full sight of them and began eating the seeds with great relish. The women looked at them longingly and finally asked him to share his dainties with them, not knowing what he really had. He tossed a handful of seeds into the air, and they tried to catch them, but failed again and again, each time going nearer to the edge of the cliff, till in her eagerness, the one nearest the edge reached out too far and fell into the ravine. The others were so close that they fell over her, so that all but two were dashed to pieces, and these vowed vengeance on the hare. He met them soon afterwards, gathering berries, and called out that he would give them the revenge they wished. "Come," he said, "you may blow these blackberry thorns and leaves into my eyes. I will let you try first, and if you do not blind me, you must let me do the same to you." They took him at his word and threw a handful of little else than thorns. But by breathing as he had done when on the hot rocks, he blew them all away from him. The women trusted to their hands to protect them, but the hare aimed well, and the thorns passed between their fingers and put their eyes quite out. He had one more adventure with women. While passing through a lonely place, he saw several women weaving jugs of willow, which they made watertight by smearing them inside with pitch. They too were planning to destroy him. He went boldly up to them and proposed that they should put him inside one of the jugs. As he could not get into those already made, they put him in one that was not finished and wove the neck of the jug about him, making it very small so that he could not escape. While they were laughing at the ease with which he had been caught, he burst the jug open and stepped out unhurt. He then compelled them to get inside of the jugs to let him weave the necks about them. He worked slowly at first to make them think that he did not know how to weave, but he made the necks so strong and fastened them well. When he rolled the jugs about till the women were shaken and badly bruised, they threatened to be revenged, but when he knocked them harder and their blood ran out over the ground, they begged him to let them out. He would not, but after a time, thinking that they had suffered enough, he struck each judge with his magic ball and put them out of their misery. A tarantula who had watched the hare resolved to punish him by his own methods. The spider had a magic club which poisoned everything it struck, but never injured him. He called to the hare and asked to be struck with the club. The hare raised it and beat him on the head and back, but the spider remained unhurt. He began to suspect something wrong. And just before it was his turn to be struck, he changed the spider's club for his magic ball and killed the insect with one blow. Thus he traveled on, conquering all who opposed him or plotted against him till he came to the edge of the world. There he saw a high cliff covered with trees of all sizes and kinds. He went up to the maple and said, "What are you good for, pray?" The maple shook its leaves in great disdain and said, "I am the food of the great head. The blood of my children is sweet and nourishing, and they give it freely to the nations." The hare next went to the larch and asked, "What are you good for?" "I," said the larch, "bind together the canoes of the people. If it were not for me, they could not sail upon the lakes and the rivers." The cedar answered the question by saying, "I make the canoes strong, so they will bear the weight of the great warriors. If it were not for me, none but women and children could sail on the waters." The birch stood next in his way and said, "If it were not for me, you could make no canoes at all. My bark is for the picture writing of the people. How, but for me, could one chief talk to his brother who lives by the distant river?" The fir tree boasted of its balsam, without which the canoe could not glide upon the water. "Ugh," said the hare, "you all say that no canoe could be made without you. You, linden, you have no part in these canoes. What are you good for?" "I," said the linden, "am for the cradles of the children. Without me, where could they be rocked and put to sleep when the beautiful red has gone from the sky and the night comes? From me, you take the basswood for your bowls and your drinking cups." The oak stood in his path, and before the question was put to it, touched his head with his lower branches and said in a deep voice, "I shelter the great warriors. I mark the spot for their councils. From my boughs are made the swift arrows that bring food to the feet of the hunter and carry death to his enemies." The ash sighed and whispered, "For me is taken the bow that speeds the arrow in its flight." The red willow drooped its head as it said, "My bark is for the pipe of the Indian. My wands are to bid him to the feast. My osiers are for his baskets, his mats, and his water jugs." Thus every tree claimed to be of so much use that men could not do without it. At last the hare came to a little tree, hardly more than a shrub, many of whose leaves were blighted. "Of what use are you?" asked he. "None," said the tree, "unless you can use me." "We shall see," said the hare. He went to the top of the cliff and saw the sun just rising. It caught sight of him at the same moment, and knowing that he had come for vengeance, it retreated quickly into its cave. It stayed there for 3 days, and all the world suffered from cold and darkness. At last, the noise of the people in their discontent reached the sun, and he was obliged to come out. The hare had his arrows ready and aimed many at him, but they fell short of their mark. When the sun was directly overhead, he drew forth a magic arrow, which he dipped into a magic tear that escaped from his eye. With this, he took good aim. It struck the sun and broke it into thousands of fragments. The flying pieces set the whole world on fire. It burned the forest, the prairie, the villages, the corn and the wild rice, the pumpkin vines and the gourds, the grapes and the nuts. The children of the hare prince ran into their burrows, and the great elk led many of the other animals into a vast field in the Rocky Mountains, around which was drawn a sacred line that no fire could cross. The fire burnt the cliff at the edge of the world. The hare sought refuge, first in one tree and then in another, but they were all destroyed except the little one that had said it was of no use. It was so small that it could not wholly protect him. His tail, his back, his feet, and the tips of his ears were burnt, every part of him except his head. He rolled over and over trying to get relief, but his pain was so great that his eyes burst and the water gushing from them put out the fire. The sun had been conquered and was summoned to appear before the council. They found him guilty of cruelty and indifference to the welfare of men. So he was compelled to travel the same trail day after day for all time and at a fixed distance from the earth. Thus, he can no longer burn trees or animals, nor can he leave them in cold and darkness. Now, how about that for a story?
That is pretty darn good.
Wow.
I like it.
It was just odd how, you know, he had to go along and kill everything, but and that everybody was plotting to kill him. Well, you know, there are several things. Is like, well, did they want to kill him to eat him because he was a rabbit? I mean, you know, but anyway, that in a lot of stories, the rabbit has some kind of magic or something. He's also the trickster. So, but in reading all the stories about rabbit over the years, I just found that one to be one of the most interesting.
It was very good.
And
very
since
good.
it was next in line in the book, I was like, why not, right?
Why not? Why not? Yes, exactly. All right. My gosh, another great story as always. I mean, see, this is the thing I love about the Indian stories is that, you know, they use an animal, but they have it's a parable of some sort, you know. And I think when they did like the Bible stories, this is where people get confused. They use real people in real places. Yeah, and people start going, well, then it could be true. Is it truth? You know, or is this a parable? You know, and after many years, it gets confusing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And something else too that it's just interesting is that somehow some of the animals had magic.
Yes.
I mean, and the magic wasn't necessarily bad, but it depended, you know, it's like his magic was his breath in this particular story. So they threw arrows at him and he blew them back. They, you know, the women threw thorns at him and he blew them back. He used his breath to cool the hot rocks. Now, that's another thing. Hot rocks to make arrows. Now, just saying, that has a tendency to think metal.
Yeah.
When I first read it, I was like, you don't heat rocks. Most rocks will shatter if you get them red hot.
But then again,
you know.
But then again, if you heat the rock, Wouldn't it make it easier to chip into a blade?
No, it'll fracture. It'll literally, some of them will explode.
Oh, okay.
No, so that's my point. But if they were making arrowheads with hot rocks, that to me, that's how you would make a metal arrowhead
metal
to form
arrowhead.
it.
Yeah.
You got to heat that metal to get it. So, so anyway, I just thought that was an interesting part of the story. Hot rocks. Wait a minute. So anyway.
Yeah, lost technology right in front of your face.
I know you're wondering if I pulled a card.
Yes, waiting for it.
And it's number 7 on the list tonight and on number page. And it's the skunk.
Skunk.
Skunk, tell me the story, so I will know it well, of how to attract and how to repel. So the skunk is reputation. Skunk medicine, go ahead and laugh. This furry little animal has a reputation that contains a great deal of power. Due to its distinctive behavior, humans give this tiny, smelly creature a very wide berth. The key word here is respect. Unlike other predatory animals, skunk does not threaten your life, but threatens your senses. You know this to be true if you've ever been in the vicinity of its prey. In observing the habit patterns of skunk, it is easy to notice the playfulness and nonchalance of its natural behavior. The "I dare you" attitude of this four-legged creature commands you as the observer to respect its space by mere reputation alone. Skunk is teaching you that by walking your talk and by respecting yourself, you will create a position of strength and honored reputation. They want me to read that again. Skunk is teaching you that by walking your talk, in other words, whatever you're talking about, you walk it. And by respecting yourself, you will create a position of strength and honored reputation, especially over time. The carriage of your body relates to others what you believe about yourself. There is no need to bully, aggravate, torment, or overpower other beings when your sense of self is intact. As with skunk, the resonance field of energy around your body is relayed through the senses. In other words, if you stink, people will notice you. No, I'm kidding, but they will if you smell bad enough. Self-esteem permeates the body's energy and is instantly recognized on an extrasensory level by others. They want me to read that again. Self-esteem, your self-esteem permeates the body's energy and is instantly recognized on an extrasensory level by others. I mean, I have met people that their auras, there was just something about them. They were strong-willed or something, There were some people that I just felt were, very spiritual and holy in a way. And that's that extrasensory perception thing going on. With skunk, learn to assert without ego. That's important in life. Learn to assert without ego what you are. Respect follows. Your self-respectful attitude will repel those who are not of like mind, and yet will attract those who choose the same pathway. As the odor of skunk attracts others of its kind, it repels those who will not respect its space. Skunk medicine people have the ability to attract others, and they are very charismatic. At the same time, the other side of their natural power is to repel those who seek to take energy from them without recycling the gifts they have taken. Skunk medicine people also know how to use the energy flows that will attract a lover. In skunk medicine, it is good to learn how to handle energy flows. Modern psychologists call this body language. In tribal teaching, this is your personal medicine, which you are showing to others. Use your medicine well and know that you are known by your reputation. How you use your energy will attract either honor or disgrace. You may want to examine what energy you are putting out that creates your present situation. So if you've got a lot of negative around you, just stop and think maybe what might be going on. You might not be putting out the negative energy, but you might be transmitting somebody else's negative energy, and that can attract. It's weird. Anyway, if you have chosen this symbol for today, which I pulled the card for y'all, you are being asked to notice the kinds of people who are attracted to you. If they emulate favorable characteristics, have enough self-esteem to recognize those characteristics within yourself. Walk tall and be proud of the accomplishments that you have made without bragging, keeping ego in check. Bear in mind that what you believe about yourself is your ultimate protection. Protect self-respect. The message for today.
Good deal.
So how was that?
That was excellent. Excellent. Always enjoy that those cards. Really do. Really do. Animal cards. Yes. I like them. Oh man, another week has gone by and our hours are flying by. I tell you, it's awesome how we can make the time fly. Jeez. But I think we have great conversations with all of this. Great card. I hope everybody enjoy the story. Lucky Stone says great story. Michelle Canam's Free says ritualistic. They also said Lucky Smith or Stone says, hey, that was Robert Fulton did the steamship in 1807. The steamship was then. Let's see.
Oh, that's good. Thank you, Lucky. But I don't know if they were going across the Atlantic yet.
Yeah, it was just the invented.
Yeah. I knew they had steamships early, but I don't know if they were doing transatlantic. I was going to say flights.
Oh yeah, Mossy Man's in the house. Made it just in time to listen to the stories. Love the Nicholas Burnett says, I love the story time with Hawkeye. See, there we go. I know some people like to hear the history, but some people like to hear the stories. So it all gets muddled up there. But are you going to have a show after this?
Maybe I wanted to. Right now, my computer's acting up. I can't see you. I have a blank screen and I still have audio. And so obviously I'm still with you. My camera's still working, but there's nothing on my screen.
Huh, that's weird.
Well, yeah, it's very weird. So I'm going to have to reboot. And if it'll reboot, I'll do a show.
All right. Yeah, because I can see you just fine. But anyway, we're going to end it there, I suppose, because I got to go to work tomorrow and it's going to be a tough week. But I got plenty of shows all wrapped up, ready to go for the whole week. I don't know exactly what's going to go on this weekend on Saturday because it's been rough with this weather. I am on call, so we'll just have to work it out from there. And we'll see you next week again, though. Ready, willing, and able. Same time, same place.
Cheers, everybody. We love you.
So with that, everybody go out, make it a great new year. And Saturday, I'm sure we'll talk about New Year's stuff or whatever. I'm sure I'll have some great guests on. And if you want to be on, just give me a holler. I really don't have anything planned too much as of yet because I'm on call. So, but we'll figure it out. So go out and be the frequency you want to receive, everyone, because you know that's what we do, setting a good example, right?
Right.
Okay, peace, everybody. Love y'all.
Cheers.
And